Hello, it's 7 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast. These are our top stories here this morning. The threat of political violence as the husband of the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is attacked in his home by a man asking, "Where's Nancy?"
Every person of good conscience needs to clearly and unambiguously stand up against the violence in our politics.
Twitter's new owner, Elon Musk, promises a shake-up with the platform offering widely diverse viewpoints.
Mama! Yes, Jacob. Bubble?
A speech crisis, how COVID-19 has led to more children struggling to talk and understand words. Sky News learns how the Ministry of Defence sent serving RAF pilots on training missions to China and allowed Chinese nationals to study at UK military academies.
You broke my will, but what a thrill. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
The original wild man of rock, controversial rock and roll pioneer Jerry Lee Lewis dies at the age of 87. In the sport, Red Bull denied cheating in F1 after being fined and given sporting sanctions for breaking cost cap rules. The weather, outbreaks of rain will gradually move northwards today, heaviest in the west. Still mild, in fact very warm in the sunshine in the southeast. And at 2:15, we'll go through the papers with journalist Genelle Aldred and anthropologist Ochota. Hello, very good morning. The US President Joe Biden has spoken out against political violence after the husband of the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was attacked in the couple's home. The intruder reportedly shouted, "Where is Nancy?" before attacking Paul Pelosi with a hammer. Mrs. Pelosi is the third most senior politician in America, and the incident comes amid heightened political tensions ahead of the midterm elections. Our US correspondent Mark Stone reports.
Off a government jet which had brought her from Washington, the US House Speaker was whisked away to the hospital in San Francisco, where her husband is being treated. It is a wonder Paul Pelosi survived the ordeal, here, inside their home in the early hours of Friday morning. As the attacker entered through this door, breaking the glass with a hammer, Mr. Pelosi, who is 82 and was alone inside, managed to call 911. A dispatcher praised for interpreting the urgency of an unclear call. When officers arrived at just before 2:30 in the morning, they witnessed the attack.
This was not a random act. This was intentional. And it's wrong. Our elected officials are here to do the business of their cities, their counties, their states, and this nation. Their families don't sign up for this to be harmed, and it is wrong.
The suspect, who has been named as 42-year-old David DePepe, tried to tie Mr. Pelosi up and told officers at the scene, "We're waiting for Nancy." Nancy Pelosi is the third most senior politician in America, second in line to the presidency after the vice president. She is among the most prominent of Democratic Party figures and a key supporter of Joe Biden.
The chant was, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" This is despicable. There's no place in America. There's too much violence, political violence, too much hatred, too much vitriol.
The political climate here right now is tense. With the midterm elections just over a week away, the nation is bitterly, dangerously divided. And those false claims of a stolen election, well, they linger and they agitate. We don't yet know precisely what the motive was for this attack, but the fact remains it is the second time in 2 years that Speaker Pelosi has been the target.
We have got to finish the proceedings.
On the 6th of January last year, she was evacuated from her office on Capitol Hill moments before a mob arrived.
Nancy! Oh, Nancy!
Security at their San Francisco home wasn't high because Speaker Pelosi wasn't there. A review will now consider whether family members of high-profile politicians do need protection too. It comes at a time when authorities are warning the threat of targeted political violence is growing. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
The head of the Royal Navy has ordered an investigation into allegations of inappropriate behaviour in the submarine service. A number of women have come forward to speak publicly about sexual bullying in the service. Admiral Sir Ben Kay, the First Sea Lord, said sexual assault and harassment has no place in the Royal Navy. He said that anyone who's found culpable will be held accountable regardless of rank. Another man has been questioned about the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was shot dead at her home in Liverpool in August. He was arrested yesterday, suspected of assisting an offender. Thomas Cashman has been charged with Olivia's murder and is due in court again next year. Flash floods and landslides set off by tropical storm Nalgai have killed more than 70 people in the Philippines. The worst affected areas are in the south, where as many as 60 are missing in one village, buried in a deluge of rainwater, mud and trees. Elon Musk says those people who've been banned from Twitter will now face a content moderation council to have their profiles reinstated. The billionaire owner has faced floods of requests from banned account holders and world leaders following the completion of his £38 billion takeover of the platform. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports.
The world's richest man is now in control of one of its most influential communication platforms. Let that sink in. After a months-long will he, won't he saga, Elon Musk buying Twitter for $44 billion. Let the good times roll, he tweeted. Musk wasted no time making his mark. Even before this takeover had been officially announced, the chief executive and chief financial officer were shuttled from the building behind me and told not to return. It is a sign of just how fundamentally he plans to change things here. And among his remaining staff, mixed feelings.
I'm half excited, half scared. I'm excited for, the new leadership, and obviously Twitter has struggled to make money with good monetization strategies. So I think I'm excited to see what he will turn Twitter into. But I'm stressed about, all the chaos it's going to bring in, and what does it mean for our day-to-day work, and what does it mean for work balance? What does it mean for some people getting laid off?
Chaos, it's fair to say, is expected. Musk believes more free speech, in his own words, is what's needed on Twitter. That could involve reinstating the account of former President Donald Trump. But for now, Musk says there's no movement on that front. Twitter will be forming a content moderation council with widely diverse viewpoints, he wrote. No major content decisions or account reinstatements will happen before that council convenes. He says he wants half the world on his website, but some are unconvinced.
He's fascinating, he's infuriating, he's brilliant, but I'm not sure that I want him in control of a fairly large platform. And Twitter's not the biggest platform in social media in the world, and it's probably at its maybe its best days are behind it, but still the fact that one man controls it, I think is a matter for concern for all of us.
Even by Musk's mercurial standards, it's been a perplexing takeover process. What happens next, though, is even harder to predict. Martha Kellner, Sky News, San Francisco.
Development experts say that the UK is now spending more of its international development budget at home than in developing countries. The Centre for Global Development says a large proportion of the pot is being spent on housing refugees, mainly from Ukraine. Well, let's bring in our politics correspondent, Amanda Acas, who's in Westminster for us this morning. And Amanda, some people might be quite surprised to hear that so much money is spent at home of an international aid budget.
Yes, indeed, it does sound rather extraordinary, doesn't it? If we look at the breakdown of this, the total budget is £11 billion, but £4 billion of that is sent directly to multilateral organisations like the World Bank, leaving £7 billion, which the UK government directly decides how to spend it. And it's more than half of that, which it turns out is being spent housing refugees here in the UK, many of them, of course, from Ukraine, leaving less money to go around on the kind of projects that people might imagine it's being spent on, helping countries that are less developed overseas. Now, overall, the budget is capped at 0.5% of national income. That was slashed by a third. It used to be 0.7%. That decision was taken by Rishi Sunak, now Prime Minister, of course, when he was Chancellor, because of the cost of COVID. But he did pledge to get it back up to 0.7% by 2024. Now, given the fact that the government have been saying that the Chancellor and Prime Minister are looking to fill a £50 billion budgetary black hole with a combination of spending cuts and tax increases, it looks increasingly likely that that pledge might not be fulfilled. The Telegraph reporting this morning, Mr. Sunak has already decided to freeze spending in this area. Politically, it could be quite difficult because the minister he's appointed in charge of this, Andrew Mitchell, is one of the MPs who actually rebelled against the decision to cut spending when that was taken during COVID. Now, the government continues to insist that the UK is one of the largest overseas donors in the world. But I think this is yet another decision which really highlights how pressures domestically on the economy are affecting our global standing overseas, particularly after that call not to attend the climate conference in Egypt as well.
Amanda, thanks very much indeed. Well, Rishi Sunak has been criticised for reappointing Suella Braverman as Home Secretary just 6 days after Liz Truss forced her out for breaching the ministerial code. And now experts are questioning where her hardline approach leaves the UK's immigration policy. Well, joining me now to discuss all of this is Mo Hussein, who's a former advisor to Amber Rudd when she was Home Secretary. Mo Hussein, good morning to you. Nice to talk to you this morning.
Morning.
First of all, what kind of a week has it been for Rishi Sunak, his first as Prime Minister? And to what extent have the headlines around Suella Braverman been a fly in the ointment?
There's certainly been a thorn in the side of the first few days of his premiership. I think he started off well because ultimately he was vindicated. All the things he said about the Liz Truss plan for the economy unfortunately have come true. Unfortunately, I say, for the state of the economic conditions around the country. But he has been the one who called it out, and hopefully he will now have a plan to correct that. So I think that hugely goes in his favour. This reappointment, though, has raised questions about his own judgment. On the steps of Downing Street, he spoke a lot about integrity and professionalism in government in an attempt to draw some clear water between himself and the previous Johnson administration. But this has led people to question how far he actually meant that, reappointing somebody who was found breaching the ministerial code just 6 days before. I think if you take a step back, though, this is really about trying to construct a cabinet from all sides of the party, and particularly the pro-Brexit right of the party, whose support he does need to try and govern effectively.
Well, yes, I mean, presumably unity is very important. We've seen how much fracturing there's been during the various leadership campaigns. How effective can he be at holding the party together, though? We read in this morning's papers, in the I newspaper, suggesting that there's a push from his own supporters to crack down on the right of the party and sack Suella Braverman. How likely is that?
Well, this will be a real challenge for him going forward. And it's almost like he's walking a political tightrope, because the party is so vast now in terms of, if you look at the more traditional southern seats, the Conservatives have held for a long time. Then you look at the new parts that were won in 2019, where the Prime Minister will want to retain these seats going forward. Then you have the moderate One Nation wing and also the ERG and everything in between that. So you're trying to keep lots and lots of people happy, and you have got their support. And in putting Suella back in this role, he's also using immigration as a bit of a dividing line, because the economy will need a safety-first approach. He won't be able to do anything too radical. It will have to be quite mainstream. So what is the dividing line between the government, Conservative Party, and the opposition? So immigration falls quite easily into that category. And I think having somebody inside the cabinet where they are tied into making the decisions is always better than having them on the back benches when they are sniping and complaining about things they're not happy with. Involving them and making them take some responsibility is clearly part of his strategy here.
And ideologically, how close are Sunak and Braverman on the issue of immigration. She's made it very clear that she's passionate about the Rwanda policy. He's backed that policy. So are they actually on the same page on this?
I think on the surface of it, it may look like they are, but there will be some differences behind the scenes. He spoke about that in his initial leadership campaign in the summer, because ultimately he was appealing to Conservative Party members who will have certain views on immigration, and you always feel the need to throw red meat to them and also to the right of the party, so they believe in you and they support you. But actually, as we found in terms of the relationship between Liz Truss and Suella Braverman on immigration, I think Rishi Sunak will probably want to see some liberalisation in terms of more students perhaps coming to the UK, or certain parts of the economy being able to grow, and that will need international labour. So this discussion around immigration, clamping down on it versus growing the economy is still very live behind the scenes. And even though he's spending a lot of time talking about the 2019 manifesto and going back to those first principles, the economic challenge is so vast that he will be thinking about, how do I balance the books? How do I get this black hole down? And how do we get the economy moving? And in some areas, immigration will be a consideration in that.
Fascinating stuff. Mo Hussein, always interesting to get your take on things. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning. Now, pandemic lockdowns have had a significant impact on children's language development, according to a charity that says 1.7 million are struggling with talking and understanding words. Speech and Language UK says those left behind can catch up, but only with the right tools and help. Sky's Lisa Dowd reports.
Mama! Yes, Jacob? Bubble? What do you want me to do?
Jacob has trouble telling his mum what he wants.
Did you want me to move out the way?
He was born at the start of the first COVID lockdown, and she says it has had a big impact on his speech and language.
We didn't do a lot because we couldn't. We could go to the park, we could go and feed the ducks, but we didn't get to see friends and family, and that would help with hearing different conversations and hearing different words and things like that, but he didn't get to do that. He is very chatty, but I think we take for granted just how much different social situations helps communication.
Jacob, can you say I? I for insect.
It's not just a problem in early years education. New figures suggest that 1.7 million school-aged children in the UK are struggling with talking and understanding words following the pandemic.
Children can struggle with talking and understanding words all the way through their school careers. And actually, if we don't help them, they're more likely to fall behind in all of the core subjects. They're more likely to develop mental health problems. They're more likely to end up in the criminal justice system.
The charity wants the government to fund better training for teachers to help reverse the lingering impact of COVID.
Children lost out on lots of social opportunities, and if parents were at home working from home, the parents might not have had the time to kind of interact as often, and it was really a stressful time for parents. So I think it has had kind of a negative impact, but the research that I've read shows that children will catch up. So if they're given the right tools and early on.
Ghost! Oh my goodness, a spooky ghost.
The Westminster government says they're investing nearly £5 billion to help youngsters following the pandemic, including targeted support for pupils who need it most. But some feel that significant numbers of children are still being failed. Lisa Dowd, Sky News.
An injured owl has been rescued and cared for by a fishing crew 100 miles out at sea off the north coast of Scotland. A crew member came to the rescue when they spotted the bird being attacked by seagulls and was then cared for by the team on board the Barnacle 2 for the rest of their trip. It's believed the owl had been blown off its normal course before landing on the boat, but the crew said that it perked up after being fed with some chopped steak. That works with my husband as well. Time now for the weather.
Anticipation is rising, and so is the atmosphere. Are you ready? The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, there'll be further bans of wet and windy weather this weekend, but it does remain very mild with some sunnier spells. While much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England will start the day on a dry note, thicker cloud will have brought rain to Ireland, Wales and southern England. Cloud and outbreaks of rain will gradually move north today, although northern Scotland will stay dry with some sunny spells for much of the day. And it'll brighten up across southern parts of England and it'll be warm in the sunshine in the southeast. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Now, thousands of mothers will take to the streets across the UK today in a Halloween-themed protest aimed at pressuring the government to help families with young children. Well, joining me now is the founder of Pregnant Then Screwed, Jolie Brearley, along with single mother and actress Jennifer Greenwood and her very gorgeous daughter Matilda sitting there. I'll be speaking to them in a minute. But Jolie, to you first of all, tell us why you are protesting today.
So March of the Mummies is a national protest to demand government reform on childcare, flexible working and parental leave. Mothers feel completely let down by this government. We feel that we're being set up to fail. Most households need two incomes to survive, yet we've created a society where in many cases it's almost impossible for many mothers to work, or certainly to work the hours that they want to. And by that, I mean we have the second most expensive childcare system in the developed world. We have a parental leave scheme that pays just 47% of the minimum wage, which means that many children are being born into poverty, or many mothers are having to return to work before the end of their maternity leave. We've got dads only being able to access just 2 weeks of paternity leave. In some cases, they can't access any paternity leave whatsoever. And we, despite a government manifesto pledge on flexible working still hasn't been made the default, and only 10% of jobs are advertised as part-time. And of course, most parents need flexibility in their employment to be able to manage their unpaid work and their paid work. So we've just created these structures and systems that are making it really impossible for families to be able to survive and thrive.
And Jennifer, I see you nodding there. I mean, you have not only Matilda, I think you've got another older child as well, haven't you? And it's had a real impact on you, having children and trying to hold a job at the same time. Tell us what's happened to you.
So my son is 3, so I've got 2 children under 3. I'm an actor and a teacher. When I had my son, I took a year's maternity. And by that, I mean I was unpaid for 3 months of that. Unpaid, as Jolie said, the minimum, the basic minimum for the first 9 months. And I was lucky enough to be supported by my husband, which throws us back into gender stereotypes anyway. And my husband was only able to take 2 weeks paternity, like so many men. And then I was unable to return to the workforce as a theatre actor because I couldn't afford the childcare. We're talking not just rehearsals in the daytime, we're talking night nannies, we're talking people who need to do childcare at different flexible times of the day. Once you introduce freelancers like myself into the equation, you might as well forget it because the system is not set up to support us. I have a really wonderful mother, grandmother to the children, who drives up every Wednesday night to stay with my daughter on a Thursday and Friday. She lives in Norfolk. She's a 3-hour drive to look after Matilda 2 days a week because I simply can't afford, as a teacher, to put her into nursery.
And Jolie, the government would say, we do offer some help, wouldn't they? They'd say there's free childcare for 30 hours a week, up to 30 hours a week for 3- and 4-year-olds, and a range of schemes depending on whether you're on universal credit or tax credits. They would say they are offering support.
But what are we supposed to do for those children that are under 3?
Yeah, but I mean, this is the problem. So when maternity leave finishes or parental leave finishes, the childcare system is so extortionately expensive. It costs on average £14,000 a year to put your child into childcare. So most, and it tends to be mothers, look at the cost of childcare and they compare it to their income and they think, hold on a minute, that just really isn't worth me working. Why am I paying to go to work in some cases, and so they fall out of the workforce. And actually, the government does keep saying we're investing loads of money in childcare, but compared to other countries, we are not. We are way below other countries in terms of percentage of GDP. And we've got to remember that this is an investment. It's not a cost. Time and time again, the research shows that if you invest in childcare, you get more back into the economy than you put in. If you look at what Canada has just done, they've invested $30 billion in their childcare sector to create a system that costs no more than $10 a day. And they've done that because they found that for every dollar they invested in childcare, they got between $1.50 to $2.80 back into the wider economy. You know, our politicians keep talking about growth, but we will never have growth unless we can liberate the power and the skills of women. And the system that we have at the moment means that women are leaving the workforce in droves, right in the middle of a skills crisis, right in the middle of a cost of living crisis, when we need that money the most.
OK, well, Jolie Brearley, we appreciate your time this morning, and thanks to Jennifer Greenwood and Matilda. I can't see her now. I want to see her again. She's absolutely delightful. Oh, it's so gorgeous. And what a great outfit. That is a pumpkin, isn't it? Very Halloween. Fantastic stuff. Thank you both very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Sky News has learned that the Ministry of Defence sent serving RAF pilots to China to teach their counterparts and allowed Chinese nationals to study at the UK's military academies as recently as 2019. Early this month, the government revealed that around 30 former British military pilots are currently in China teaching the Air Force how to defeat Western warplanes. Well, Labour has said the latest revelations could pose a significant threat to national security. Here's our Security and Defence editor, Deborah Haynes.
Making friends, as then Prime Minister David Cameron offered China's president a taste of British culture. This was 2015, when a desire to do business trumped security fears. Then came the reality. A crackdown in Hong Kong, claims about human rights abuses, and threats against the island of Taiwan. With policy on China changing, the UK this month revealed some 30 former British military pilots are training the Chinese Air Force in what it described as a threat to UK interests. But Sky News has learnt the Ministry of Defence itself also helped to train the Chinese over the years.
I've been told by a source that the Ministry of Defence here behind me sent up to 4 serving RAF pilots to Beijing in September 2016 for around 3 weeks to teach what was known as the Aviation English course. Apparently, this was about helping Chinese pilots learn about how to run overseas military deployments.
Also, at least 3 Chinese officers have been allowed to go through basic training at the RAF's college in Lincolnshire, one as recently as 2019. And a number of Chinese nationals are thought to have studied here as well, the more senior Joint Services Staff College in Shrivenham. A senior Conservative MP was shocked.
I mean, this is just astonishing, given the fact that there's so many concerns over the last, not a couple of years, but indeed the entire decade. We should have woken up to this, and we clearly haven't.
It's not just a UK problem. On a visit to a US aircraft carrier operating in European waters, the head of NATO said all allies must be aware of China trying to use their knowledge to gain an advantage.
It is absolutely an issue that we have actually on the NATO agenda, is how to not share expertise, knowledge, technology with a country like China.
A spokesperson for the Ministry of Defence said the UK has never provided fast jet flight training or any other sensitive training for People's Liberation Army Air Force pilots. But that still leaves questions about why concerns weren't raised faster about former pilots going off to train the Chinese. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
So it's time to turn our attention to the newspapers. Here with me to review them this morning are the anthropologist Marianne Ochota and the journalist and author Genelle Aldred. So welcome back to both of you. And we're going to dive inside the papers this hour. We dealt with a few of the front pages last time around. But Genelle, you've picked out a double-page spread in the Daily Mirror, which has got a fantastic picture of Rishi Sunak visiting a hospital, and there is a woman literally wagging her finger at him.
Yeah, she told him to try harder when it comes to nurses' pay. And I think that's something that many of us and many people agree with. 79% of people believe there are not enough nurses to deliver safe NHS care. And that's something that we should all be concerned about. Now, the service was on its knees before COVID, but the Tories have been in power for over a decade now. So this deep austerity that they love, mainly because I think a lot of them don't feel the pinch, I think it has put the NHS in a really, really tricky situation. And so pay up PM is the phrase, really, because in March, the MPs, with wailing and gnashing of teeth, will take their annual pay rise. And they had a pay rise last year, and it's set by an independent standards authority, which is funded by the Treasury, and their budget's approved by the Speaker of the House. So the tail's wagging the dog. So I think before we get to next March, the next financial year, I think people in the NHS really want to see what are the government going to be doing for nurses' pay, and that will be set against what they do for themselves next year.
It's a really tricky one, this one, Marianne, isn't it? Because I'm sure a lot of people will be hugely grateful for the care they always receive when they go to the NHS, but particularly during COVID and being such a tough time. And yet the government is going to have demands from every sector, isn't it, for increases in wages at a time when budgets are just so tight, and we've heard so much about tough decisions being needed.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we don't have a magic money tree. Fundamentally, I think growth has to be the basis of our future prosperity. But fundamentally, I agree with Genelle. Austerity is a political decision. One of the things that really struck me when the kind of commentary around Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's failed mini budget came out was that these were described as unfunded cuts. Well, they weren't unfunded in as much as they were going to borrow to fund them. And you could have the conversation around whether they were making the right kinds of tax cuts, certainly. But there's a certain point at which, that kind of old adage about you save up so you can spend it when the rainy day comes. Well, if there were a rainy day, it's absolutely monsoon season now, isn't it? We're in the midst of an energy crisis. There's huge global instability in terms of these kind of shifting global powers. We're still coming out of the fractures of COVID and the global pandemic and all the impacts on the global supply chains there. Whether you're a supporter or not, Brexit has had an impact that needs to be dealt with and factored into the system. And so fundamentally, maybe this is the time that actually we do need to borrow more money.
Okay.
And actually invest in public services, because when you undercut the teachers, the nurses, the social workers, the police, then the fabric of society starts to fall apart. It's not unsustainable.
And it's a huge debate of our time, isn't it, at the moment, and how different parties would approach it. So, but let's move on to an international issue, which I know, Marianne, that you wanted to talk about. I'm not even sure which paper it is. It's the Telegraph, actually. But a lot of the papers will be covering these protests in Iran.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Not that many papers are, and you do have to burrow deep into the inside pages to find reporting about these protests that are now right across Iran and have been going on for 43 days since the death of a young woman called Mahsa Amini, who was murdered by the morality police in Iran because she wasn't wearing her hijab, her headscarf, correctly. This is quite an extraordinary moment in Iranian society, where there was initial unrest amongst people who perhaps might be the obvious candidates for protesting against the government. But now this has spread right across Iran, beyond Kurdish areas, and all sorts of people, older women, are baring their hair and cutting their hair in public. The report in the Telegraph today is that there's an increase in people walking up to clerics wearing turbans and knocking their religious headgear from their heads, which is a huge act of disrespect and would have been utterly, kind of appalling and terrifying in previous days. It's a huge act of courage and bravery to stand up against the government.
Yeah.
They've reported that they're going to put 900 people on trial. They're enacting a thing called preventative arrests. And in places where there are big protests, they're doing things like cutting off internet connectivity, so people are under kind of media blackouts. And it's extraordinary that people are still protesting. And I think the world's eyes do need to be on Iran, and I think our support needs to be with the Iranian people.
Yeah.
So it should be further up the papers. It should be on the front pages.
Yeah, although, of course, very difficult to report from Iran at the moment as well. We should mention that. But yes, there, as much coverage as possible. I agree. It's a very fascinating story, and really interesting to watch as it goes ahead. Let's move back to UK issues, Genelle, because you've picked out a story. I think it's the front page story, actually, in the Telegraph, and they pick up on it further inside as well. And this is about how Oxford and Cambridge select their students.
Yeah, so they're using a different metric, so to speak. And what they want to do is they don't just want to look at the best grades, so to speak, but they also want to look at grades relative to students in their own context and how they perform against their peers. You could say they're looking for all-rounded students and a culture fit. But to some people, equality feels a bit like oppression. So some fee-paying schools are saying now the system is now biased against students that attend fee-paying schools. Now, for me, I think it's very clear that a lot of students at fee-paying schools do have an extra advantage when it comes to filling in those forms, being able to show what they know and all of those things. And so the fact that now the system is a bit more rigorous, a bit more competitive, meaning that other state students will have more of an equal chance to get in, I don't think that they should see that as a bias against them. I think it's saying, okay, look, we want the brightest and the best. It's not just about grades, but it's also about students, how well-rounded they are, what they contribute to university. And I think that's brilliant because we know that a lot of Oxford students have positions of power in our country. They run a lot of things, and actually they should reflect the whole of society. And going to a fee-paying school or not shouldn't be the only metric or the metric that gives you an advantage.
Very quick thought on this, Marianne. I mean, some people might say, well, that's what grades are for, to be able to compare like with like. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's better to go on grades alone or to delve deeper?
So, confession, I went to Oxbridge, I went to Emmanuel College in Cambridge, having come from a state school. And one of the things that really struck me was that not only did people who were coming from much wealthier backgrounds have all the additional advantages...
Sorry, very quickly, Marianne, we're running out of time.
Sorry, it needs to be much more nuanced because it's not just about grades, it's about the rounded person, where they're coming from, but also when they get there, they need the support so that they don't feel like a massive fish out of water.
OK, brilliantly summarised. Thanks very much indeed, Marianne and Genelle. I'll see you again next hour. Thank you.